No.
All right.
No.
And we're here to talk a little bit about the revenue package that we have rolled out this morning. You have heard Democrats, and in particular Senate Democrats, talk for many years about the broken, upside-down tax structure. And today we are demonstrating our commitment to make changes to that broken system. We are taking steps to fix, we have taken steps, I think, over many years to try to fix it. For example, through the enactment of the capital gains tax in 2021 and the funding over the last few years of the Working Families Tax Credit. We had some of those policies tested at the ballot box this last November, and the most popular of all the, or I guess the least popular of the initiatives, the most popular policy was the capital gains tax, in which we asked just a few thousand of our wealthiest families to pay money to help make sure that our public schools are funded, to make sure that there's funding for childcare and early learning, and for the Working Families Tax Credit. That was approved in the vast majority of counties all across the state by nearly 2/3 of voters, contradicting, I think, expectations about the unwillingness of voters to consider increased taxes. And the message that we have taken from that is that the voters are really interested both in making sure that wealthy people and businesses pay their fair share of the tax burden in our state, and that they don't want to see vital services cut. So as we approach this session with this looming budget deficit this year, we thought about how to be responsive to what we have heard loud and clear from the voters. And the package that you're seeing today and that Senator Frame and Senator Robinson and I are going to be talking about is one that shows that we have heard the voters, right? So we're going to ask a small number of very wealthy individuals and businesses to increase the amount of taxes that we're paying. And at the same time, we are going to use some of that revenue from those very wealthy people and businesses to reduce the sales tax that all 8 million people in the state pay, right? So both a reduction in regressive revenue and an increase in progressive revenue from people who are best able to pay it. And that will help us, as part of a balanced approach, resolve the budget shortfall that we're facing right now and help make our budget sustainable into the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Frame.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. As our Majority Leader said, what we are putting forth today truly is a comprehensive set of reforms on our tax code that not only meet this moment, but help us prepare for the challenges ahead of us. It's going to allow us to honor our commitments to our communities and keep our promises to our kids, while modernizing our tax code that's nearly a century old, does not reflect our current economy, and does not reflect our current realities. As Senator Peterson has said, we knew coming into this session that we would need to take a balanced approach, and Chair Robinson has been leading the incredible work of looking for savings and efficiencies, and you've already seen some of our proposed cuts. But we knew that unless we proposed new progressive revenue, that the level of cuts that we would need to offer would be devastating to our communities and our kids, and we're not going to do that. So you'll hear from Chair Robinson more next week about the proposed budget. So what we are putting forward today, we are choosing not to balance our budget entirely through devastating cuts or doubling down on our regressive tax code that impacts our working families and small businesses disproportionately, but rather, Senator Peterson said, proposing that the wealthiest among us pay what they owe to help fund our public schools, services for public safety, health care, and services that protect some of our most vulnerable members of our community, including our elderly that depend on long-term care, our folks with developmental disabilities. So I'm going to run through each of the proposals at a high level as quickly as I can, and after that I'd be happy to take some questions. So first in the proposal is the financial intangibles tax, which is a tax of $10 on every $1,000 of assessed value of certain financial intangible assets, specifically stocks, bonds, exchange-traded funds, and mutual funds. This tax is only on property owned by those with $50 million or more of those specific assets. It generates $4 billion a year that goes to our public schools, which helps our state uphold our paramount duty with new increased funding for special education and the daily operating costs of running our schools, proposals that you've already seen the state Senate vote off of the Senate floor. Second, we remove the cap on employer payroll taxes with a 5% tax on large employers on the amount of payroll expense over the Social Security threshold, which at this year is $176,100, and that indexes with the federal government's threshold. This tax is limited to companies with $7 million or more of payroll expense. That's less than 5,300 companies in the state. It is similar to the City of Seattle's Jumpstart tax, and as such, it has a full credit for businesses that are already paying that tax to the City of Seattle. That generates $2.3 billion a year when fully implemented, and again, the revenue goes to public schools, healthcare, and other programs that protect the safety and well-being of the public and social services for our communities most vulnerable. Third, we allow the property tax to grow by population and inflation, raising funds for our state's common schools levy, again for our public schools, and at the city and county level, this revenue goes to public safety. We know that our current 1% cap is arbitrary, and we are instead moving to this combined rate of population and inflation. For local governments, this is an option. They can take this higher inflation rate and population if they so choose, again, rather than being tied to that arbitrary number. And this will help ensure that our local communities have the revenue to reflect the actual cost of providing public safety and community protection services for their communities. That generates for the common schools $779 million over the 4-year, again, while offering increased funding opportunities for cities and counties and special purpose districts. It's also really important to draw attention to, within this proposal, has a great progressive tax reform right inside it, which is, under this proposal, if you are a low-income senior, disabled person, including disabled veteran that qualifies for our current property tax exemption program, you will no longer pay the state portion of the property tax under this proposal. Fourth, we repeal 20 ineffective and obsolete tax preferences. What we mean by that is the public policy objective has not been met, it is unclear if the public policy objective has been met, or the tax preference is legally obsolete, according to our nonpartisan auditors at the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee and from review from our Department of Revenue. This includes exemptions like in-state hauling, gold bullion, prescription drug wholesalers, and more. And that generates more than $1 billion of revenue over the 4-year, again, just from repealing 20 ineffective and obsolete tax preferences, with the money going to public schools, public safety and well-being, healthcare, and social services. Finally, as our majority leader shared, we cut the regressive sales tax. As cost of living is rising, Washington's current regressive tax code puts an additional strain on households that are really struggling to meet their basic needs. And this proposal reduces that disproportionate impact on low and middle income households with a 0.5 point sales tax reduction, going from 6.5% to 6%. And that decrease in revenue is about $1.3 billion per year. So just to conclude, and then we'll take questions, our nearly century-old tax code relies mostly on flat taxes, does very little to distinguish between small businesses and large corporations, between homeowners and owners of skyscrapers, and between working people and billionaires. I would say it's antiquated, it's unfit for a modern economy, it is deeply unfair, and as voters have spoken loudly and clearly, they do not want us to cut critical public programs just to give a tax break to the extremely wealthy and very profitable corporations. Rather, we're insisting that the wealthiest among us and the most profitable corporations do their part so we can fund world-class schools, healthcare, infrastructure, and the services that all Washingtonians count on. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Well, 3 or 4. Two questions.
I'm gonna, like, the majority
Yeah, why don't we
leader.
start with Jerry and then we'll go
I'm
to
sorry,
Jerry.
Senator Robinson, were you going to say?
I was going to welcome your question, Jerry.
Two questions, respectively. First, on the revenue, what is the expectations on this package for the 25-27 budget? How much revenue?
We're expecting that the net revenue for the new budget will be about $6 billion.
The net after the sales tax reduction.
After the sales tax reduction, then
Would that be over 4 years, but what about?
no,
No,
for
that's
the
for the 2-year.
for the 2-year budget.
Some of these things don't take effect till 2027, so you're still at
But
that 6
2020, remember that fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27 make up the 25, 27 budget. So even though a lot of it doesn't take it doesn't take full effect until the second year of the biennium, the total net is $6 billion in the first biennium.
So, doing the math, I don't know, but so it's $6 billion for the first biennium, and then another $6 billion for the second biennium.
No, because it's really only 1 year in the first one, so it becomes what, about 11 net in the second biennium.
And on the property tax, just to, on that, is there a numeric cap now, or does the 1% go away? And
There is no particular numeric cap, so it's population plus inflation. So whatever that, if you had 1% inflation and 0.5% population growth, the cap would be 1.5%.
And only public safety?
The local governments need to be able to take the increase, the local governments need to certify that they have a need for their public safety program. And that's broadly understood to include police and fire, but also public defenders and courts and prosecutors and all of the things that go into the criminal justice system.
that's just a simple majority councilmatic.
That would just be councilmatic exactly the same way that taking property tax increases now. And they don't have to take it. That's decided
It's a
by
choice.
the local government, elected by and accountable to the people at the local level.
My last part just on it, is this proposal assume the state will do the same, do the inflation, population change plus inflation?
It does, yes.
And you don't require a vote of the legislature for a substantial need, though, right?
It's part of the, well, no, we know that there are substantial needs in the schools, but it's part of the budget process. So that would be, that increase would be, I think, built into the budget each biennium.
Okay, thank you.
At that same growth limit?
We could
Exactly.
choose to use
We could
that.
choose to use that as the maximum. We could also choose to use a lower one if we want.
Okay, why just unveil just the revenue plan now as opposed to fitting it in with the rest of the budget? And I'm coming at you from the fact that I don't know which huge shortfall figure you're dealing with. I have no idea what programs you're cutting. Essentially, I'm coming at you as, yeah, we want to do these things with the revenue, but the budget is a much bigger picture and we're missing vital pieces from it. And my other question would be, are you going to hit the rainy day fund?
The question about the rainy day fund, you'll have to wait till Monday to learn that. I mean, the public knows a lot of our big reductions already via bills that have been introduced. Many of them do require bills, and I think we've introduced all of them, or will have as of today. And so, yes, the budget that will roll out on Monday is a comprehensive look. I think we wanted the opportunity to allow the public to understand the revenue that we are proposing ahead of time, so that it is highlighted for transparency and understanding, and that we can talk about it as a package on Monday.
Okay, but why just do the?
Well, and the other thing,
I don't have context.
John, just from a mechanical perspective of how to produce the budget,
Yeah.
the budget, right, the people who are literally typing in the lines of the budget and then producing all of the paper need to have the bill numbers for both the cuts and the revenue proposals so that those can be referenced in the budget. So we were going to need to introduce the bills anyway, and rather than just dropping them in the hopper and letting everybody think about whatever they thought about them, we decided to talk about these bills so that you all could digest them and the public could be prepared for the full budget rollout on Monday.
Okay, again, I'm coming at you, the public has no context where this fits into the.
Well, I
overall
mean,
picture.
look, we have been talking for months
Yeah.
and months about the challenge that we're facing and about our intention to do a balanced approach.
Yeah.
And about our intention to do cuts, and we've debated some of those bills and sent them already out of the Senate. For example, the delays and cutbacks in the Fair Start for Kids Act, right? So that went out last Wednesday. And we've been talking for many months, you've heard me talk about our need to do progressive revenue. Now, and what some of the possibilities were, and I don't think there's anything that's in the, maybe not the tax loopholes. I think that's a, cutting that back is an idea that has developed and that Senator Frame has really been working on, along with JLARC, right, over many years. That's its purpose.
Yeah.
But none of these things are surprising. We have been talking about them, trying to socialize the idea. The next step in that process is to have the concrete details of particular bills, and that's what you're getting today.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, there's more transparency from having these on a separate day to think about, because there is going to be an overwhelming amount of line-by-line detail in terms of the budget when Senator Robinson rolls out her budget on Monday.
Can I ask about the exemptions that are being removed? I'm not a tax person, but I was trying to make sense of what they were saying. The in-state hauling bits, I saw some references to agriculture. Can you just explain a little bit more about, I guess, how those exemptions are going to work and more of the specifics of where they're hitting?
Yeah, the in-state hauling is a good example of when we talk about they are ineffective or legally obsolete. There are a number of tax preferences in statute that were passed in the context of some federal state law that we were addressing that. And what's happened since the time that that was passed is that the underlying law has changed. I think in that case, it's federal law that has changed. And therefore, the conditions under which we passed it and the public policy objective to be met has simply, it's not the same anymore. So they are legally obsolete. And that is the lens through which we applied that proposal. Senator Solomon and Senator Lovelet, who are the prime and second sponsor, are both members of JLARC. JLARC is part of an overall process that we put in place, I think in 2013, to have rigorous transparency and review of our tax preferences. And our nonpartisan auditors, they go through this. They try to either measure the public policy objective or infer it if that's not clear. And they come back and tell us, you need to review and clarify this, or the public policy was not achieved, perhaps you need to repeal it. And we went through that and looked at where the public policy objective was not met, where it's unclear if it was met, or if the underlying legal conditions have changed, making it obsolete. And that's the package of tax preferences that you see in the package.
In the modern world, we generally try to limit tax preferences, right? So we put an expiration date on them. But in the old times, we didn't do that. So we've got stuff hanging around from the 1930s and 40s and 50s that just doesn't comport with the modern economy or modern conditions.
Yeah.
And that's the whole reason that we have that process. So, you hear in Ways and Means a lot of times people crowing about how JLARC came back and said, yes, this tax preference should be extended, and so we're doing it. We haven't been so good so far about doing the opposite, which is saying when JLARC comes back and says, we're not sure that this actually accomplishes anything, saying, okay, well then let's cut off the exemption.
I would also encourage you, if you want specifics about particular tax preferences in the package, to go to the JLARC website. They produce really good synopsis of every tax preference that they review with their recommendations. It's in plain language. It's very understandable and readable, and I think you could get detail better there than we'd be able to provide you today about individual preferences.
I'll say one more thing about that bill. I really focused on the 20 preferences being repealed that generate revenue. Within that bill is also 39 or 40 exemptions that are not being used, and we repeal those to really clean up the statute for clarity, for taxpayers, for compliance. We also have a number of provisions in there that adds expiration dates, as Senator Peterson alluded to, because prior to 2013, we didn't have an automatic expiration date statute. So we add some expiration dates and take an attempt to clarify legislative intent where it was unclear, and JLARC asked us to weigh in. It's a very long bill, you'll find.
So,
Yes.
so 4,300 residents who pay the FIT, financial intangibles tax, 5,300 companies on the business side. Critics are going to say those numbers are going to drop. You're going to scare people out of the state with these moves, these new taxes. How can we be sure that we won't lose those people and those companies?
I'll just offer, I think Washington State is a great place to live, work, raise a family, start and grow a business. People want to live here for a reason. And I believe that they will stay here and continue to engage in our community. We have the talent they need. We have the beautiful natural resources that they love. We are continuing our commitment to invest in our public schools and other public institutions that matter. That is why people want to live here. So I believe that and hope that there is shared value around shared responsibility of funding our public schools and other key public institutions. And many would acknowledge, even the wealthiest among us, that our tax code is deeply, deeply unfair. It is unacceptable that the lowest income Washingtonians pay at least 3 times more in taxes as a share of their income than our highest income households. We are second to worst in the nation for fairness and progressivity or regressivity in our tax code. And so, no, I think that this is a great place to live. It's just a hard place to afford to live if you're not making millions and billions of dollars. And so we're asking those who have done well to contribute what they are capable of contributing to fund our public schools and other services.
And, I'll say, last week, Drew, I had a bunch of constituents who were here, and a woman who told this story that is just kind of seared into my brain about what she uses the Housing and Essential Needs program to help her pay her rent in my district, and she uses the Aged, Blind, and Disabled program to help her with cash for food so that she can make it from month to month. She has a cat, and she runs out of food in the third week of or runs out of money to buy cat food in the third week of the month typically. And she has a deal with all the best pet food on Broadway. And she goes there and they give her some food so that her cat can eat. And, I guess in a different way, I guess I want to say we have some extremely wealthy, great corporate citizens, great individual citizens in this state who want the community to thrive, right? And I think when people start to think about this through the lens of that vast inequality, I mean, you're literally talking about people who could give the state $1 billion and probably not even notice it. It's a detail for them in their portfolio, right? It isn't going to change anything about the day-to-day experience that they have in the world. And the contrast between that and the special ed kids who get services in school, or the woman who's going to get some food assistance so that her cat doesn't have to go hungry. I mean, that's what we're really talking about. This is a battle of those values. And I really think when we are able to tell that story, that you're going to have, probably not everyone, but a large majority of those folks say, hey, you know, as a citizen of this great state, like, I'm proud to do my part.
Can you talk about the timeline, I guess, of all of this? Are you going to hear it and vote on these bills in committee soon, and then are you going to vote on the floor before the budget, after the budget, at the same time? How is all of that going to work?
The budget process will largely be next week. So Senator Robinson's proposal will be out on Monday. It'll be heard in Ways and Means on Tuesday. We're expecting to vote it out of Ways and Means on Thursday. And then we're expecting to vote it out off of the Senate floor on Saturday. The revenue proposals, where people will have, full 10 days basically to consider them. And then we're going to start the hearing process on those on Monday, the 31st.
In
right?
Ways and Means.
In Ways and Means. And, that same day, we expect that the House is planning to vote the budget off of the floor. So then we'll go into the conference process to talk about reconciling the budgets. And as part of those negotiations, we expect to determine which side is doing which revenue and what the total package will be. And when we've made those when we've gotten that alignment between the House and the Senate, we expect to move the bills as agreed. Anything? Did I
That's
miss
fine.
it? Okay.
Does that mean, just to be clear, that the legislature will pass budgets, but will not vote on the funding to pay for those budgets until later?
The legislature will pass each side's own budget. We have to agree on what the funding level will be and what we're going to fund with the revenue. And then we'll do all of the bills that are necessary to implement the budgets, both the reduction bills and the bills to raise the revenue that we've agreed on.
At the revenue forecast this week, there was a lot of talk about instability, knowing what's happening at the federal level. I want to ask this in the context of the financial intangibles, knowing that that's rooted in stocks. The market could change, things could get weird. How can you budget on that aspect, knowing that stocks, as an example, change all the time and things could get worse?
So one of the funny things about our tax system is that we have parts that swing wildly, like the real estate or the REIT, the real estate excise tax, right? So you have some years where there are basically no sales of substantial buildings, and the tax might drop by 50%. And then you have other years where the market goes bananas, and we have 150% of the revenues that we expect. The sales tax is more steady, but ebbs and flows with the economy. Probably the most stable tax is the property tax, because you just don't have wild swings in the total value of property. Now, you think about a week where, or a few weeks, because of the behavior of the federal administration, the stock market is in these wild gyrations, right? Well, what does wild gyration mean? It means on a particular day you might lose 1%, and then we're getting close to over a 2-month period or something, having lost 10% of the value. That still means you have 90% of the value there, right? And remember that this tax is on the total amount of those portfolios that are $50 million or more. So in context, and by the way, it's measured on December 31st of the year, right? So in context, it's just not going to change, as I think it'll be a more stable tax in terms of the market and what the market does. Now, it's absolutely true that if we had, a bunch of people just flee the state, then that could have an effect. But it'll take us a while to know exactly what the revenue experience is. The Department of Revenue, and Senator Frame can step in if I'm misstating this, but the Department of Revenue has built in the compliance number into its projections about the revenue. They're actually expecting only 10% of the people with over $500 million to be paying the tax.
Yeah.
Of the people eligible.
I would say, I would characterize it as the compliance rate is assumed at 48% for most of the taxpayers in this class. And at the very top, I don't know that I've seen a number, at the very top, they're assuming 10% compliance. And what I would say about that is I don't believe, and I think the research does not support, that people will move. What we do expect them to do is engage in a level of tax avoidance behavior. That's accounted for in the revenue estimates, and I believe, and the department believes, that our revenue estimates are quite conservative because of that assumed compliance rate. We're trying to be really thoughtful and again, conservative in our estimates as we involve this in our budget writing process. So we've accounted for that.
Got time for one more.
Just one more? Speed round, maybe. Now, have you talked to the House budget writers on this? Are we going to see a vastly different thing, or are we on the right track, if someone wants to?
We've been in steady conversation with
every
the
step along the way.
House for months about these issues, and the proposals are not going to be identical. There are going to be large overlaps between, and we don't need to get out in front of theirs. There are going to be large overlaps, and I think we have absolutely shared values between the House and the Senate about what we're trying to achieve. And over the next few weeks, there will be an opportunity for public hearings and a lot of discussion about what people like and what they like better, what they dislike and what they dislike more. And so that'll be part of the normal tug and pull of the last 5 weeks of the session.
Was Governor Ferguson updated on these
Governor
numbers?
Ferguson, the Speaker, and I have also had a couple of conversations with him this week, and we will continue regular conversations with him.
Any sense that that was something he was?
I will let him speak for himself.
That's the problem.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.